Hello, race fans. Welcome back to Off the Record. I'm your host, David Schildhouse, and many of you may be wondering, what happened to Davey Siegel? Where did he go? Well, he got himself a great new opportunity over at Sirius XM NASCAR Radio Channel 90 as the host of Loose Ends. So Davey moves on to that new opportunity, and of course, we all wish him the best. And now I come in to host this show and talk NASCAR with you. And really, my goal for this show and what I want to do is bring you the stories that you're not going to see on Twitter, you're not going to see in mainstream media, and you're not going to see from the big outlets. I want to be able to put a spotlight on the midfield, the back markers, the really, truly compelling and interesting stories of the guys and the girls who work in the trenches, have to work twice as hard with half as much at their disposal to try and make a living, a career, a successful go of it in this sport that we all love. Now, I have a little bit of a background in the industry myself. I worked as a mechanic and a spotter back in 2011 in the NASCAR Truck Series. Last year, I did a little bit of video and photo work in the Cup Series. And this year, I came back to spotting most recently this past weekend with Anthony Alfredo in Portland. So a little bit of a background working in the industry. I've been watching NASCAR since the mid-90s. And over the years, I've built a lot of connections and relationships with people that I believe are going to translate to bringing those stories here on this show for you to learn more about these drivers, crew chiefs, spotters, team members, owners, whoever I can get a hold of to tell these stories that really need to be told. And I think that everyone is going to stand to benefit from that. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about what we're going to be doing here off the record. And I look forward to sharing the experience and the journey with all of you. My first guest on Off the Record is the driver of the number 23 Chevy for Our Motorsports. Anthony Alfredo joins me. Anthony, we had ourselves a very wet but historic weekend in Portland. A lot of fun travel, but more importantly, on the track, your first ever career pole and the first ever pole for your team, Our Motorsports. A lot of good momentum, I think, was gained from all that. But I mean, what's that mean for you all this time racing? You finally got your first career pole.
It was awesome. And of course, with it being the first race for the NASCAR Xfinity Series in Portland, there can only be one pole sitter for the inaugural race. And we were able to accomplish that, which was pretty neat. But more importantly, a big accomplishment to get Our Motorsports' first pole position in qualifying and my first. I think the only other time I've had a pole in my career was actually for twin K&N East races at South Boston. So I got the pole for the second race by having the fastest lap of the first race. So I don't even know if that really counts. It wasn't just straight up qualifying, of course. And even this weekend, we didn't have the final round of qualifying because of the rain, but the whole field did qualify on slicks before that rain picked up. So we were able to accomplish that. I'm really proud of our team. Big to get that exposure for Dude Wipes on our Chevrolet Camaro and all our other partners who support myself and our team.
So it wasn't just because I was there is why you won pole, is what you're saying. You're saying a lot more went into it than just bringing me along?
Well, you're just going to have to come to Nashville and then we'll find out.
I don't know how Corelli's going to feel about that. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but you know, for a team like Our Motorsports to go out there, win the pole, start up front, get all that coverage, and for you to get, I think, 2 or 3 interviews, that's a far cry from things that we were seeing even a year ago. So it was cool to be a part of that. And I know for you and your team and everybody that was involved there, from your crew chief, Pat Trison, all the way down, all the other team members, everybody was absolutely amped. And it just kicked off the weekend in a really good way. But we'll talk about the racing and the race itself, but the feeling of being on top for you, rough year last year in the Cup Series, you come over to Our Motorsports in the Xfinity Series. What did that do for you personally as a driver, just to know that you were going to be leading the field to the green flag?
It was a big deal, especially at this level of competition. Obviously, we want to be racing for wins, and it's not about where you start necessarily. It's about where you finish. But anytime you're up front, whether it's in qualifying, even being fastest in practice, just gets you that exposure, and people are talking about you on social media. So that's a big step. And like I said, some look at it just qualifying, but for us, that's a big accomplishment. We have way less resources than a lot of these other teams. So to be able to go out there and get the pole at a track like Portland was really, really cool, especially because it was a road course. And that's a discipline of racing that is totally new to me, but I really enjoy. And I've been working really hard on trying to get better at, just because there's so many of those races on the schedule now. It's critical that you do not have throwaway races like back in the day when we saw 2 road courses on the schedule. It wasn't really that big of a deal if you didn't run that well for some teams, but others look at it as an opportunity to do better. And I think for us now, that's important to us. And then, like I said, I enjoy it and I want to be as good at it as I can be. So it was cool to see all that hard work kind of come to fruition by getting a pole and qualifying and having a solid race going for us. It didn't really end the way we planned, and we struggled in the rain with the setup. We got it better. Then it started drying up, and I really think it fell back into our hands, just like in qualifying, and we were going to have a great day, but got caught up in one of the many crashes at the end of the race, which ended up taking us out of contention. But I felt like we were going to have a shot at a top 5 finish, at least a top 10. So that was unfortunate, but regardless, it was still something to be proud of this weekend for our team.
And a top 10 for your team is very impressive. I mean, that was some of the chatter that I've been hearing is, and as you alluded to, Our Motorsports doesn't have the most resources in the Xfinity Garage, maybe 25 full-time employees from what I understand. But to go out and perform at the level that you've been performing, you're right there on the playoff cutoff line. You've been in contention to win. Going back to Auto Club, you had a chance to win that race. You're on pole in Portland. So you're doing more with less, and that's definitely grabbing people's attention. So when you go into a race, you're on pole, you're leading the field to the green flag, and then you experience the ups and downs of what you experienced in stage 1, losing a lot of positions. Then stage 2, getting them mostly back, getting stage points, and then being in a position to race for that win in stage 3, ultimately getting a DNF. That's a hell of a roller coaster to go on as just a driver and a race team. But when you ride that momentum in the Xfinity Series, how does that position you? What do you take away from a weekend like Portland? How does that apply going forward to other race course or other road courses that we have on the schedule?
It's definitely exciting. I think those are tracks that we could perform well at, and we learned a lot this weekend in particular. But as you mentioned, roller coaster of a day. That's just how racing can be, and that's why you never give up. You know, you see some guys have a really strong first half of a race, and it falls apart at the end, or they're not really present up front at the start of the race, and then they come out of nowhere at the end and execute, kind of like we did at Auto Club and some of these other races. So a lot of it's about survival and executing, just putting yourself in position for the end. That's the most important thing. Obviously, you want to have a day full of racing up front, getting all the exposure possible. But if not, at the very least, you want to be in contention at the end, because that's when it matters most. And we did that at Portland and many other races this year. For Portland, the race started in the rain. We did not have the best setup for the rain, which maybe is likely why we qualified pretty well. But in the rain, we just dropped back from first all the way to maybe 17th at the end of the stage. But stage 2, we just made an adjustment, and I drove all the way back up to 5th or 6th and finished stage 2 there, scored some stage points. And then, of course, we went back green for the final stage. And there was all sorts of crazy strategies with if you should be on slicks, on scuffs, or rain tires, rather. And then we ended up having to pit for damage anyways. So we changed tires, and I felt like the race was going to play into our hands, but it just wasn't meant to be. So definitely up and down day for sure. But starting on the pole had us on that high, and that's still a big accomplishment and gives us confidence for the rest of the season for sure, as you mentioned.
Well, it was a DNF, unfortunately, for Portland. That crash there towards the end, inside of 10 laps to go, if memory serves correctly. And that makes 3 DNFs in a row for you, dating back to Texas. You had the crash there, you had the crash at Charlotte, and now the crash at Portland, which is a far cry from how the season started for you, which kept you so high in the points, a lot of really good finishes, but now a really tough streak, 3 DNFs, 3 junked race cars. And for a team like Our Motorsports, that's not something that's easy to stomach. Granted, it's not just you, it's your 2 teammates, Jeb Burton and Brett Moffitt as well. Jeb came away from Portland with the tore-up race car, and I think just about everybody came out of Portland with the tore-up race car. But specifically for you and the 23 team, having 3 DNFs in a row, what does that do for a team like Our Motorsports, which again doesn't have the most resources compared to somebody like a Junior Motorsports or Joe Gibbs Racing?
It's really challenging, David, especially because after last year, right? I had a rough year. That was a big step for me going cup racing, but I didn't really have the opportunity to run full time in a competitive Xfinity ride like I hoped. And I had a great opportunity to go learn a lot at the highest level of NASCAR, racing the best competition. Maybe not the most competitive situation, but just being there, running laps, learning, running more races that are twice the length was just invaluable, priceless experience for me, because I always lacked experience in my career because I was always part-time and trying to find a full-time ride with partial funding, not quite enough sponsorship to secure anything until then, right? And that really helped me come back and secure this Xfinity Series ride when the seat opened up. And I was able to take what I learned now and apply it this year in a more competitive situation. We're still a small team. We've got a ways to go, but everything I learned has allowed me to be pretty competitive with a very small team. Like you said, right on the playoff bubble, we've had top fives, quite a few top tens, led laps, done a lot of things I did not expect to accomplish this early in the year. Got a pole, for goodness sake. So it's pretty cool what we've been able to accomplish. And I think a lot of it has to do with the people we have at Our Motorsports, the people who believe in me, Chris Auer, his family, my partners for coming on board and sticking with me. And then, of course, the things I learned last year that, like I said, were so priceless. But these last 3 weeks have been very challenging. As I was saying last year, after I started learning and getting better, I was cleaning up my mistakes, but we just found ourselves getting into accidents still more frequently than not because of mechanical issues and tires blowing. And it just was crazy how many things went wrong. And it just wasn't meant to be. I mean, sometimes you have a year like that in motorsports and you don't know why it's happening to you. And it's stuff that you literally can't prevent. But that's how it's been the last few weeks for us, because I was redeeming myself the start of the year, running up front, leading laps. I think we made it the first 12 or 13 races without any incidents. And then Texas, we had an issue on pit road and we had to come back down, which forced us to the rear when we were running inside the top 10. I got caught up in a wreck back there. At Charlotte, we had a pit road penalty. I had to go to the back and got caught up in a wreck back there. So that's a big part of it, as I mentioned earlier, survival, right? Well, it's easier to survive when you're running towards the front and kind of away from that trouble. But when you're having to navigate your way through the field, especially at the end of races when the intensity is picking up, it's likely you can get caught up in an incident. And both of those accidents were pretty big crashes, and we just had nowhere to go. And then Portland was the same thing. It was less of some sort of penalty or issue. It was more of us being forced down pit road to fix some damage we had on that restart. And then we took it as an opportunity for some strategy to put the dry tires on it and see what we could make happen. But we never really got to see it through just because of that wreck in front of us. And once again, just kind of got shoved into it from behind and couldn't avoid it. So it's aggravating because there's nothing I could do differently. I don't know if it's less aggravating because I guess if you make a mistake and you say, oh, I could have avoided it by doing this, it makes you feel worse probably. But at the same time, it doesn't help us because we still have 3 torn up race cars, which puts us in a bind. We don't want to put ourselves in that position financially. We want to use our funding to get better every week, not have to fix stuff. And even just as a team, when you're repairing cars, you're not constantly, fluffing and buffing in the shop and just fine tuning on it like we had been able to do the start of the year. So definitely challenging. All 3 of our teams, Brett, Jeb, and I, the 02, 23, and 27 team, don't have a lot of equipment or people. So it's definitely hard for us. But as you mentioned, these bigger teams, their race cars for the following race are sitting on the setup plate Monday morning. So when the road crews come back, that car is already built, set up, it's done. All they have to do is fluff and buff, do some final scaling, whatever, and load it up and go to the racetrack. Whereas we come back from race weekend and almost try to build an entire new race car or, change the setup in our current race car to go compete again the next week. So you're at such a disadvantage compared to these bigger teams. And that's not just from lack of equipment and all that, but obviously, just a budget to be able to do that and have that much equipment. So it's hard to compete because they can afford to have a torn up race car because they've got another one waiting for them when they get home. But we need to fix what we have and go race it again.
And something that also I think exemplifies that is what we saw in Friday's practice. Noah Gragson gets turned around on the straightaway, junks his primary car, but he's got the backup there. If that had happened to you or one of your teammates, what's the situation? Did you have a backup car waiting for you?
Let's just say there was a backup, but you probably didn't want to drive it because you'd have a miserable day.
So yeah, I mean
There's a lot
that's
of
the big
tracks we've
thing.
been to this year without a backup car, and a few times we have had one. It's maybe not fully prepared, or it's not our best car in the fleet. It's just enough for you to basically go out there and log laps and complete the race. You know, it's definitely not going to be as competitive as our primary cars.
That's a big cry from what it used to be. I mean, I remember the backup car was exactly that at all levels of motorsport. You didn't want to have to fall back on that, rely on it. Nowadays, teams are bringing a backup car that's as good as the primary, if not better. And so, you know, we can see Noah Gragson do that, jump into his backup car and still be very competitive. Yes, he got spun around, but that car had plenty of speed in it, but it wouldn't have been the same case for you or your teammates if you had to make that same compromise. Thankfully, didn't have to do that, but still a DNF. Another tore up race car, and more work for the boys back at Our Motorsports to do. Just fascinating to learn more about how the smaller teams operate compared to the mega teams that we see, what life is like, and just what those differences are. Basically, what I get out of it from what I've seen is you have to work twice as hard with half as much to try and get 75% of the same result. That math may not check out, but it's somewhere around there, I think. But we'll continue this conversation. We're going to take a brief break, keep talking with our guest here, Anthony Alfredo, right here on Off the Record. Welcome back to Off the Record, talking with Anthony Alfredo. And Anthony, the big thing this season, I remember when you and I spoke before Daytona even rolled around, you told me who your crew chief and who your spotter was for this upcoming season. And I got really excited. You got Pat Tryson on the box. You got Rick Corelli up on the spotter stand. Two veterans, two legends of the sport, guys who have seen it all, done it all at the very highest level. And now here you are with access to guys like that and their notebooks, their knowledge. What has this season been like working with those two?
It's been awesome for me as a young driver. Like I said, after the Cup Series season, the experience I gained has helped me a lot as a driver, have more confidence, have a better idea of what I need to do behind the wheel to help not just myself perform, but our team succeed. And that now to have that in combination with a very experienced spotter who's seen a lot and has done a lot of racing himself, that can really kind of coach me through a race and help position me well, with a crew chief who's seen it all from, you know, winning cup races and, you know, winning or losing, just putting himself in position so many times with so many successful drivers is critical for me too, because Pat and Rick both have a lot of confidence in their abilities, whether crew chiefing, spotting, or helping me. But now that gives me confidence behind the wheel. So for example, when Pat makes a pit call, I never question him. Whether it's a call for better or worse, I never question his decision because he has so much experience that he makes those calls with a lot of confidence and he doesn't hesitate. So I don't second guess what he's thinking or what he's calling. I just go with the flow and I trust him. And we have a great relationship. We have such awesome chemistry, him and all my guys, really. We've all had so much fun this year. It's been a challenge going to the racetrack every week, just with how hard everyone's had to work to stay caught up. But we have so much fun doing it, and we're all very thankful to be working with each other and have the opportunity to do that. And I think we're doing a lot with a little. I call us the little team that could. And all those resources we lack, I don't mean just funding, tire data, sim time, an engineer to run simulation on a computer to check our setups. Going into the year blind, zero notebook. We've been building a notebook from scratch, all three of our teams. That's why Chris wanted 3 cars, was to kind of triple the knowledge gained each week. And it's been working so far. But to go into a year blind like that, it would be nearly impossible for a lot of people. But we have such experience, so much experience and knowledgeable individuals on our team, like Pat, Rick on the stand. That helps us do a lot with a little. Like I said, we've been doing, and even just getting started. I think he knows how to make the most out of the little bit we do have. So he's just played such a big role in our whole team, my performance on the track, our equipment being competitive, because not having all those tools is such a disadvantage. And that's speaking from experience, because I have had all those tools needed to succeed and have been on the other side of it now. So it's cool to see what we're accomplishing without it, because I know how hard it is to not have it, and what it means to have it. And I think going into this year, Jeb and Brett, same thought. We were all like, kind of had an expectation for where we should run and how we would be. And at the start of the year, we were thinking, okay, maybe this is where we'll be. And we just almost immediately exceeded those expectations, which was pretty cool to see. And that's because there's no lack of effort. Everyone's working really hard to make the most of the opportunity. And that falls back on that experience of guys like Pat Tryson and like I said, Rick Corelli, just helping me behind the wheel, being my eyes in the sky. It's been really cool to work with guys who've had success for so many years in the sport, and hopefully I can get them some more success here later on in their career, but still early in my career.
We talked about Pat Tryson, his racing reference page. You were marveling at just not only how extensive that is, and that's not to call Pat old, but he's been around a long time. I mean, I remember watching him, when I first started watching NASCAR in the mid 90s. I mean, Pat Tryson was a name that was well known, and he only continued to get more well known as the years went on, taking drivers like Ricky Rudd and Mark Martin to the chase and winning races, and just a very impressive resume. What do you think a Pat Tryson is worth on the track to you? Is it worth 5 spots, 7 spots, 10 spots?
That's a great question. I think for us, going back to the resources we have and where we maybe stack up in the field, right? You have your A group of cars, which is your large, huge budgets, staple names. And then you kind of have that B group of cars, right? Which are the little bit of the smaller teams, but still competitive around that top 15. And then you kind of have another group behind that. And I think we're the best of all the B cars, no doubt. We outrun all those guys pretty much every week. And we're running at the tail end of the A cars. And we usually beat a couple of them. And trust me, it feels really good when you outrun a team that's spending 3 times as much of the money as you and has triple the amount of equipment, people. It's really rewarding. And when they do outrun us, they should outrun us. But when they don't, we technically shouldn't beat them, right? So I say on paper, we're in that maybe honestly, our 3 cars, maybe you could put 16th to 19th on paper, but we're all running top, maybe just call it 10th to 15th, that 15th on our worst day. That's not a good day for us, which at the start of the year, that was kind of our expectation, was, okay, let's try to run top 15 every week. Well, we're running around that. All 3 of our cars are kind of around that 12th spot. So we usually are close, if not in the top 10, and nobody worse than 14th or 15th. So I would say it's got to be worth 5 to 7 spots most of the time. And that's just that experience. Okay, we don't have unlimited parts to build a race car. What is the optimal setup we could put in this car with what we have, right? And that's what we've been doing every week. Pat, all the crew chiefs, our guys been working their tails off. And then us drivers, I don't get sim time, but I'm on my SimSeats driving simulator at home on iRacing, logging laps, getting visuals for all these places, and just doing as much as I can, studying and trying to get better, with those tools I do have access to. And I think all that put together is why we're all running competitively and why we're right on the playoff cut line, chasing a playoff spot.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up. That's the next topic I want to discuss is exactly that. You sit there 13th in points. You've certainly been higher than that earlier on in the season. The 3 DNFs have hurt, but it's been kind of interesting to watch that the cars that you've been chasing right around that playoff cut line has also been struggling a little bit as well. And there's 2 sides of that. On one side, you haven't been losing points to them because they've been having bad races as well. But on the other side of that, they've been having bad races, which means an opportunity to pick up points on them. And you haven't been able to do that because you've been struggling as well. So for the audience, explain what it's like sort of on the cut line, life right there in between being in the playoffs, out of the playoffs, because you don't have a win yet. Certainly a win would fix all of that. But when you're chasing the same cars week after week and you see them struggling too and not being able to capitalize on that.
It's stressful being right in that bubble, especially because there's only so much time left to make it right. And winning a race would make it so much easier, just locking yourself in. But there's only so many that we really feel like we have a good shot to go win, just because of those, the lack of resources, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. We've run top 5, we've led laps, and there's been races we felt like we could win and been close to it, which I truly believe we will win a race this year. I know we can do it in the right circumstance, but sitting on that bubble and being that close to being in that top 12 is you're always thinking back, oh, what if we did this here or did this here to gain a spot or two? And more importantly, the last 3 weeks, the fact we're still 13th is amazing. It's a double-edged sword, like you said. Okay, well, it could be way worse. Most circumstances, it doesn't come like this. 3 crashes in a row, you would go from, if you were 13th, you'd probably be 16th or 17th in points. But fortunately, a lot of the cars, I think we've been racing from probably, if not 10th, the 11th and 12th place. And then we had a pretty good gap behind to 14th. So we were kind of 11th through 13th were really tight. We were 13th going into Texas. Both cars that we could have passed at Texas, we were outrunning one of them straight up. The other one had a really bad day, had a crash, and then we ended up crashing. So that was an opportunity for us to maybe break into 12th, if not close that gap of points. Well, Charlotte, same thing. That same car in front of us crashed. The other one had very complicated mechanical issues and were multiple laps down, finished almost as bad as we did, even though they were rolling at the end. So by then we probably would have been 11th or 12th at the very least in points. We'd be in that playoff inside the cut line. And then last week, same thing, had a really good day going. We're outrunning the guys we needed to outrun it and had a crash at the end, resulting in a DNF. So that gap out front has grown. Not as much as it could have, thankfully, but it's definitely going to make it harder to race our way into that top 12 in points without a race win. But the gap out back has tightened up quite a bit because of our accidents. It was kind of funny because after Charlotte, we ran, or Darlington rather, we ran top 10 all race long, had an issue at the end, got pushed down pit road, got a speeding penalty, had to go to the rear. Drove all the way back to the top 15 from 30th or whatever it was on that last restart with only so many laps left. So it could have been worse, but that should have been a top 10 day, and that would have helped us out a lot. But I said to Pat after the race, man, it's not often we have the opportunity to run top 10 all day and score stage points straight up without some sort of strategy. So we really need to, when we have a top 10 car, we need to finish top 10. I'm like, we can't afford one bad race until the playoffs start. Well, here we are 3 races later from then with 3 DNFs in a row. And we were hoping not to have one bad race before the playoffs. Well, now we've had 3 and they've been in a row. So hopefully we got all that bad luck out of the way and we can get back to running up front where we belong and get the points back that we need. I still think we have a chance to make it inside the cut line and get up to 12th before the playoffs start. But at this point, my mind's just set on winning a race, which it really has been all year. But I've really sat down and circled the ones I know we can go win at and lock ourselves into the playoffs before they begin.
What are those races that you circled? Obviously, we have Daytona coming up, so that I would imagine that's one of them. What other races have you circled as opportunities to win realistically?
I think Daytona's the first and foremost. Road course or 2 on the schedule if we put ourselves in the right position. We showed the speed that on a road course this weekend with the pole, so I don't see why we can't try to do the same thing there. And then some of the short tracks, honestly, I think is a strong program for us. We have to get our intermediate program a little bit better, but I say that we weren't very strong at Auto Club at the start of the year, but we're in the right circumstance. Pat, with his experience, saved me a set of tires for the end of the race and just told me to trust him. And sure enough, we got a caution. We put him on. And if it weren't for that red flag at the end that cooled everyone's tires down, I think we would have won the race. And we also lacked in a couple areas that we couldn't quite compensate for with just tires during that race. So I think, some of them could be a surprise. There's probably a couple I didn't circle that could suddenly become a chance for us to run up front and maybe sneak a win or at least get a top 5 finish. and that's going to be critical for us to make it. But going back to earlier this year, if you told me that we'd be on the playoff bubble racing for a playoff berth, at this point in the year, I probably wouldn't have believed you, because to say that we're 13th in points is pretty amazing and a big accomplishment for our team. Yet I can't help but wonder where we would be if we haven't had the issues we've had. We'd likely be top 10 in points, which would be amazing. But that's not the case. We're just going to have to work a little bit harder to get back there before they start.
There you go. The little team that could. Our Motorsports, specifically the number 23. For Anthony Alfredo, it's been an up and down season, but a lot of ups, a lot of fun ups. Been really enjoyable to watch. And if you're looking for somebody on Saturdays to cheer for, a team to get behind, a driver to get behind, it's hard to not choose this guy right here. It's a feel-good story for all of Our Motorsports, making some history this last weekend in Portland, and continuing to push forward to exceed expectations, to do more with less. Anthony, I appreciate the time joining me off the record, and I look forward to seeing you do more great things as the season rolls along.
Thank you.
All right, don't go anywhere. On the other side of this break, we'll be back to talk with another driver out of the Xfinity Series who had a different ride this weekend in Portland. That's Ryan Vargas, coming up on Off the Record. Welcome back to Off the Record, joined now by our second guest today. It is the driver of the number 6 for JD Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Ryan Vargas joins us. Ryan, hello. Welcome back from Portland. It was a wet, wild, and crazy weekend, but for you overall, despite being in a different car, and we'll talk about that, a pretty positive weekend.
Yeah, I mean, first race with Mike Harmon Racing. It was a fun weekend with those guys. Obviously, a much needed weekend for those guys. They haven't had the best of luck this year, just due to varying circumstances. So it felt really good to be able to go out there and get them their best finish on a non-super speedway, since I think someone said it was Kansas. So really fun weekend, just simply vibed and made it to the finish. And that was my job, and we accomplished that.
There was a lot of vibes for sure. Anyone that paid attention to social media saw the post-race picture. It was a quality post of just exact. I like how we timed that together perfectly.
Yeah.
But that's a great summation of it. It was exactly what you needed. We're going to dive into that story and hear about that in your words. But before we get to that, I want to talk about at the start of the weekend, I ran into you into the garage, came up to you, said hello, and you were elbow deep in a toolbox, pulling out tools and working on the car, thrashing on that thing to get it ready, because it did not start off on a positive note for you in practice. What happened, and what did all you have to do to get that car ready to race?
Yeah, there were a few things that just kind of went wrong in practice. We had basically one of the, I guess you could say, clips on like the drive shaft. It was messed up, and so we had a gnarly vibration on the car, and we basically just kind of had to pull back and just say, all right, that's it for practice. We're just going to go out there and qualify, see what we have right now, just make sure we make this car run and run good. And so I only got about half a lap of practice, realistically, came in and we fixed it, and we went out for qualifying, consistently got faster and faster. I know the timesheets don't show it, but I feel like we had a pretty decent car. I was going probably 60 to 80% the entire qualifying session that we had on the track, and we were still not too far off the cars in front of us. Like I said, I know the timesheets don't show it, but we consistently got better and better, with my first laps on track realistically being in qualifying. So I was very happy with that. The team was ecstatic with that, and we went out for the race, kept it clean, and our home 23rd. Can't really complain about that.
Now that's a solid run for that car. As you said, the best non-super speedway finish for them in a very long time, and it's a credit to you as a driver to jump in there in strange circumstances. And so let's dive into that. It broke the week before the race, right? The news of you not being in the 6, Gray Galding taking over the 6 for Portland. And on the heels of that, you joining Mike Harmon Racing in the number 47. So you still got to race, unlike the last season at Watkins Glen, when you weren't in the number 6 car. You were helping out as a good team member, right? As a good employee, spotting and all of that. This time you took a different approach to that and kept yourself in a car for the weekend. So what was the story behind that, in your own words, of how that all worked out, from learning you weren't going to be in the 6 to putting together a deal to drive the 47?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's things like, I'd rather not discuss, but, at the end of the day, like I mentioned in my release, the sport's a business and a business first. And I understand that. I think everybody in the sport understands that. It's at the end of the day, each team has to do what they can to, continue the business and moving it forward. So, I understand the decisions. I understand everything that's going on. And the opportunity I have at JD Motorsports is an incredible one. And it's allowing me to drive race cars and pursue a dream that I never thought was possible. So just sometimes things happen, but, an opportunity came about at my Carmen Racing. We, realized that, this was an opportunity for us to go out there and have a solid performance, and that we did. So, it's just, sometimes there was an article that came out, like a thing that came out yesterday on Toby Christie's site, showing, I think I was like, I had like the least amount of accidents of the season. And I think that kind of showed itself right there on Saturday. I think 32 of the 38 cars that started the race had damage or were in an accident. And we weren't one of them. And I think that goes to show kind of what my job, what was there. My job was to go out there and run that race and finish. And, if I went out there and ran 34th, 35th all day, and that's where we finished, oh, well, so be it. But my job was to finish. And that's what we did. And we got my Carmen Racing some valuable points. And I'm very excited to hop back into that JD Motorsports number 6 at Nashville and continue to represent Johnny, his organization, and, continue putting our team in the best position I possibly can.
Well, you mentioned the Toby tracker and the incidents. I was going to bring that up as well, because that is a big deal. I mean, as a full-time driver, and that's something that Toby, keeps an eye on in all three touring series. And you have the least amount of incidents for the entire season at 3, which is spectacular. And that really fits, I think, the culture and the need for an organization like Johnny Davis has of you need clean runs. I think Landon Castle made the ever popular phrase of P whatever with no stripe, right? And and I had Anthony Alfredo on earlier in the show. His team, Our Motorsports, not worldly different as far as resources and needs of needing to return clean cars. And he's had a tough stretch where they've been tearing up race cars. And we talked about the impact it has on their organization being maybe a little bit bigger than JD, but everybody needs clean cars and clean runs, because if you're not spending time fixing cars, then you're spending time upgrading and making them better. So, for you to keep the car clean for Mike, to get them good points and to keep that streak of clean racing going, I think is one of the biggest positives that you can take away. So keep working on that. Keep those incident points down. So we want to see on the Toby tracker every time on the left side with the fewest amounts, as opposed to the right side with the most amount of incident points. But on the Cup side, Chase Elliott does have the most incident points, and he is the points leader. So
it varies. It varies in importance. But it goes to show though, if you go out there and do have the least, amount of incidents, on track, it definitely helps how you run. It helps, your positioning. And also, you also got to think it helps your team. We went out to Charlotte this 2 weeks ago. The chassis we ran, chassis 059, that chassis is one of our better chassis, and they wreck. We had to start at the tail, even though we qualified 17th. We had to go to the rear. We're coming up through the field, and they wreck off of turn 4. The track is, all I see is cars spinning everywhere in smoke. I knew in that moment that the infield was turf, and yeah, it spawned memes. Yeah, it was a cool TV bit, but you see me jumping through the turf, jumping, catching air, but that very well could have been me knocking the front clip off the car, piling into a crash. So while it wasn't ideal, while it did hurt us in that race going through the turf and having, some suspension issues, it could have been a lot worse. And I think that goes to show, because that chassis 059, that's my Nashville car. We're turning that car from Charlotte, taking it to Nashville. And then what's the next mile and a half after that? I'm going to we take a different car to Atlanta. So we take that same car to Pocono. So we got to transform that car from Nashville, get that thing ready for Pocono, and then from Pocono to Michigan, and then from Michigan to Darlington, then Kansas, then Texas. We got to use that car a lot this year. So if I go out there and wreck it, that puts us behind the 8 ball. Like when we wrecked that car, because that's the same car we wrecked in Vegas, we were down to 2 cars. And we didn't wreck a lot of cars this year. But with just that one car out of the fleet, I had to race conservatively and be smart. And that's what's helped us a lot in the end game.
Now, when you wreck that intermediate car, then that leads me to assume that for an intermediate track, when it's down getting fixed, you're taking either a road course car, a short track car, something like that then?
Yeah, so very fortunately, we do technically have 2 intermediate cars, a short track car, and so we have 062. That's our other intermediate car, and then chassis 50. That's our short track car. When 059, the one that we ran at Vegas and the last weekend, wrecked at Vegas in that accident, we had to take 62 to a lot of tracks, and so really we were just trying to like basically start over and think, okay, what do we need to do here? Like, what's the next, like, how do we make this car work here? And we had that same issue come up last year. We had an accident at Pocono when Justin Haley hit that inside wall. I was spinning like a top across the track and I right into it. That was my car that I had to use in Atlanta a week and a half later. So we ended up taking our short track car to Atlanta. Very fortunately for us, we ended up having our best finish of the season at the time, which was 14th. And it worked out. We took our short track car for a one-off 1.5 mile race, and it worked out. But it's very rare that that happens, because when you have a short track car, a dedicated short track car, it doesn't like running those bigger tracks. Same thing with your 1.5 mile car or your intermediate car. It doesn't like running those short tracks. So the mindset and the way you basically build these cars, you have a plan with it. And if that plan goes awry, you're going to be behind the 8 ball.
That's one of the hardest parts of being, on a smaller team with limited resources and a limited fleet, is you have to really take care of your stuff, because you're taking non-matched chassis, bodies, then to tracks they're not meant to be running on, which is going to start you on the back foot for the whole weekend as it is, as far as performance goes on a relative basis. So it further underscores your incident counter being low and really what you're doing for your team. Now, on the other side of that at Portland, the car that you normally drive, the 6, ended up smashed, and really nothing I think Gray could do there. Tough visibility, tough area of the track. And he gets involved and I assume knocks the front cliff off of that one. So what does that do for you as the primary driver of that car when somebody else is in your car? It crashes, nothing you did wrong, but how does that impact you?
Well, now we got to dig another road course chassis out of the back that we didn't plan on using. So now that puts us, like, Road America is in a few weeks. So now we have to start from scratch with a whole different road course car. Granted, this car did run last year, so we have notes. We understand what this car likes. We understand all that, yada, yada, yada. But that wasn't part of the plan. So now we're having to rebuild, start over essentially, and, figure these things out. So that's just the process of being in our situation. It's not a bad situation by any means, but that's just how it is. And so, the value of bringing that car home clean, like Mike Harmon Racing, I brought that car home with a scuff on the left rear quarter panel. That's going to be able to be repaired. They're going to be able to take that same car, most likely the same body, everything on it, to Road America, if they plan on going. I'm assuming they are, and race it. They don't have to worry about it. All they have to worry about is putting it on the plate, setting it up, and out the door.
Makes it sound so simple. We will continue the conversation here with Ryan Vargas on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. You're watching Off the Record. Welcome back to Off the Record, talking with my guest, Ryan Vargas, about the weekend that was in Portland. And Ryan, I want to discuss now, you've spent most of your, last 2 seasons with JD Motorsports. You jumped into with a different team in Portland and Mike Harmon Racing. Obviously, 2 different cars, 2 different teams, Mike Harmon even smaller than JD. What stood out to you as far as a big, big difference in working with these 2 organizations? The biggest thing, obviously, Mike Harmon Racing, they've had definitely, to put it lightly, a difficult year. They've had mechanical issues. They haven't been able to, they've missed a few races this year. So for us to go to Portland, there was 38 cars on the entry list, and no cars went home. So we had to go in with the mindset of points, finish this race, be smart. And Mike Harmon, he's a racer just like Johnny Davis. So there wasn't that much of a difference there. At the end of the day, they cared about being there at the end, being there on that checkered flag lap. And we were there. We did that. That goal was accomplished. I keep saying that same thing, but the goal was accomplished. The goal was to finish wherever that may be. And for us to come out of there with a top 25 finish for how
how everything came together. Ryan Bell, the crew chief over there, he bust his tail. He did a lot of work getting that car ready. I was there Monday night helping getting that car prepared. I was there from 8:30 to I think I left the shop at like 12:15, 12:45, somewhere in that time frame. I don't remember. It's all blurry in my mind, but because I was tired. But there was a lot that went into that, and it was. I'm trying to find like the right wording there. It was so unique to go from one team to another. It's not a good nor a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like it's a different experience. And Bell, he's a crew chief who's worked at JD. He understands that feeling of going from, a JD to a different organization. And he said, it's not a bad thing. It's just different. It's a different mindset, different game plan.
Do you think there's anything you can take away from your experience with Mike Harmon Racing this past weekend and apply it to JD in a positive way?
I mean, here's the thing. At the end of the day, I have 75 laps now under my belt at Portland. 75 laps at a road course and a NASCAR Xfinity Series car. So now I have that in my notebook, notes in my notebook saying, hey, this is what I found. This is the setup we did. How do I apply this to what we have? How do I apply what we do at JD to what they're doing, and kind of see what I like best? We went to what we brought to Coda when I drove the 6 car, the Twin Liquors car, to driving the Mike Harmon car at Portland. They were polar opposite setups. And there were some things I liked about the Coda car, and there were things that I liked about the Portland car. So for me, it's about finding that happy medium and also applying all the lessons I learned behind the wheel.
Well, it's good to pull things out of a different, as you said, a different experience, unique opportunity to drive something different, but maintain, the same car that you've been driving now as well. When that incident happened on track and Gray was caught up in the wreck and that car was crashed out, your car, did you know at the time, like, was that relayed to you? Did you see that?
I saw it. It happened right in front of me. I saw them spinning, and I'm checking up. And I see cars still piling in, and I'm like, oh no. And I roll past the incident. I see the 6 car with the radiator knocked out of it. And I'm like, man, that's not good. It is what it is. At the end of the day, it's, like you mentioned, it's poor visibility, just a mixture of everything going on. I hate it for, our JD team. I hate it for Gray. I hate it for all those guys because they bust their tails, and, now we got to kind of start from scratch. But, that's racing. As everyone says, I watch Josh Revel. He's an F1 YouTuber, and that's his thing. It's like he talks about all these things that happen, but at the end of the day, that's racing, and that's just what happened there.
Yeah, it's part of it. That's what makes it such a unique sport. You can see, listen, seeing your own car that you normally drive, ahead of you on track, it had to be a little bit surreal, but, thankfully more cars in the fleet that you can use, and you jump back into it this coming weekend. So I want to talk about now for you, your experience as a race car driver and the hard work that you do. I don't think I know of a race car driver who does more outside of the race car than you when it comes to being involved with the team, working on the cars, but more importantly, working on the business deals to make sure you can get to the racetrack with sponsors on your car. We've seen a number of companies adorn the number 6 throughout the season, but it hasn't always been that way. Just for the audience, tell them about how you spend your time when you're not driving the car to try and get sponsors to come and support you so that you can go out there and do what you need to do.
Well, I'll explain it this way. The device I'm doing this interview on, this is my iPad. I have a spreadsheet on here. I have all my Word documents. I have all my different presentations on there. I spend most of my day putting stuff on there, doing LinkedIn messages, doing emails, phone calls, all that stuff. Behind the iPad, I have a whiteboard with a bunch of companies listed that are guaranteed potentials and ones I need to reach out to. I have a schedule of all the races, stars next to the ones that are sponsored, and no star next to the ones that are unsponsored. On top of that, I have my notebook right here that I write everything down in, and trying to keep tabs on what I need to do. And another thing is cold calling. It's not fun. It's not the most fun thing in the world. And sometimes you deal with people that don't want to hear you at all. But for every 100 no's, you're probably going to get 2 maybes. And of those 2 maybes, you might get lucky to get a yes. But that one yes could be the difference between racing and not. And that's the reason why I do it. I should have been done racing back in 2017. My parents sat me down and said we couldn't afford to do it. So another year added on to my racing career is another year added on life for me, and another year added on in what I want to do in my life.
So this effort that you put in to stay on the track, to keep driving race cars, is it just a solo effort? Is it just you? Does the team help you at all to try and find sponsorship for the cars? How does that dynamic work?
Absolutely. We have some people within the organization at JD Motorsports. Tony Proscaro, he's one of them. He does a phenomenal job finding partners and, facilitating different partnerships as well and helping me with mine. But, a lot of the times, it is me just trying to make these calls, trying to figure out all these things, and I hand them off, or all these different things. 90% of my time is spent doing sponsorship, and the other 10% is prepping for races. I wish it could be the other way around, because as a driver, you do need to be ready. But if you're not in the race, you're not prepping. And so for me, a lot of the time, and by the way, Tony, he has to worry about another car. He has to worry about the 4 car. He has to worry about basically for the team, so I have to worry about selling for myself. A lot of drivers in this sport, they have management, they have agents, they work with a management group, they have this person. For me, other than what we have at the team, I'm on my own. I do have some people that I refer to, which is great. I am so thankful that there are people out there that are willing to spend their own time to help me, because there's no, half the time there's no real reward for that. It's just simply they just want to help me. And that goes a very long way, because at the end of the day, if there's a sticker on that race car, that sticker directly kept me in that car. And that's just the full-blown truth. If there's a sticker on that car, it kept me in it. And sponsorship is so big in the sport, and that's why I put everything I can into it.
Well, that's nice. I said, I don't think I've seen a driver who spends more time working for his team outside of the race car than you. I mean, anyone who goes to the track, if they get a garage pass, they're going to see you, wheeling the car in and out of the garage and working on it if need be, running around doing things. And of course, all the time that's spent, you have to make a little bit of a drive from here in Charlotte down to Gaffney to go to the race shop as well. And you do that pretty much every day. So it certainly has to be a labor of love, and you love what you do. So when you sit down, how hard is it for you to pitch somebody as a team that traditionally doesn't run into the top 15 or the top 10? How hard is that conversation to have? Obviously, you said for every 100 no's, you get 2 maybes, but do you have sort of a standard approach you take, or is it sort of dependent on who you're talking to?
Well, you look at the names of partners that we've had on that 6 car: TikTok, Alvin Kamara, Best Buy through our Swan deal. We've had various other major brands, other brands such as Newegg, Monarch Roofing, different brands from all different types of industries. I mentioned TikTok. If I approach a company and I say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, we may not be running up front, but if you come in and invest in what I do and invest in this organization, it's going to help us perform. It's going to help us go out there and have a career day. And that's what TikTok did. They sponsored me for 6 races. We went out there and finished 8th at Texas, which for our JD Motorsports organization, that is a massive day, especially on intermediate track. That goes to show what this team can do and what I can do, when, everything comes together. So when I approach these companies, I basically say this major worldwide corporate entity trusted me, who at the time was 19 years old and I was 19 turning 20, trusted me, some kid who was running, with a smaller team, much less known than many of these other drivers. They trusted me with their name, with their brand, with representing their company in the sport of auto racing. I am still to this day the only sole athlete that they have sponsored. And
they being TikTok, right?
Yeah, TikTok. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that these big companies are trusting me with their brand and trusting me with their name, because you have to go out there and put everything you can and do it honestly and do it with every single ounce of your being. Now we have Swan, we have Monarch Roof, and we have a bunch of new partners that we're bringing on board, which I'm so excited to reveal coming up, hopefully. Partners that I'm working on bringing, I should say. And it is so important to have that reputation as someone you can trust with your name.
Well, you certainly have been getting some people's attention, especially when it comes to qualifying at the super speedways. Your name seems to float to the top, and we do have one more super speedway coming up here in a couple of months. In August at Daytona, we go back to the World Center of Racing. So is that where we see pole number 1 for Ryan Vargas? We got a first-time pole winner in Portland with Anthony Alfredo. Are you going to join that list of first-time pole winners when we go to Daytona?
I'll tell you this. When we went to Talladega after our Daytona performance, at Daytona, it was very unexpected. We put a ton of effort in the off season, basically from November to Daytona, the time Daytona came around, into making sure that car was right. And by God, it was right. And so we took that same car, cleaned it, fluffed and buffed, and got it ready for Talladega. Qualified even better. Went from 8th to 7th, I think it was. So now we know what that car is capable of. We know what we're capable as a team, and me as a driver at a super speedway. I feel like we can go out there and run up front and finish really well. Our best finish this year technically is at a super speedway with Atlanta, finishing 12th. I mean, a pole, I don't know. Those RCR cars are tough to beat. They get their stuff nice and right. But for our little organization to go out there and make those guys sweat a little bit, I think that's the most important thing. My team, with Bird, Gabe, Case, Spud, all those guys. I mean, it's
a lot of nicknames.
Yeah, it's a group of us. It's 4 or 5 guys. We went out there and beat mega teams. Mega teams. Not Ganassi. Gibbs, Stuart Haas. Like, those teams are amazing organizations, and we went out there and not qualified them. And that's I was going to say that says a lot about our organization and our team. So I'm very excited. A pole, I don't know, but it's crazy to say this, but I don't think it's impossible. But we'll definitely try and be up there.
Well, that's certainly a driver and a car to keep an eye on, especially when we go back to Daytona and Talladega later this season. It was 8th. It was 7th. You're trending upwards when it comes to qualifying at the super speedways. So, top 5 might be next, and who knows? You could be sitting atop the whole speed sheet once it's all said and done. But Ryan, I appreciate the time. Thanks for coming on the show today. Look forward to having you back sometime in the future. Best of luck in the coming weeks. Look forward to seeing you do good things.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And like I said, it just feels good to be in the sport. It's an honor to drive for teams like JD and Mike Harmon, and I'm happy to represent them well.
You got 2 good ones to watch that we highlighted here today off the record, and Anthony Alfredo and Ryan Vargas. My thanks to both of them, and my thanks to you as well for tuning in and watching. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. I've been your host, David Schildhouse. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.